Once upon a time, there lived a girl whose father was a very popular farmer. Her name was Nkoli, and she was the only child of Mazi Anayo, who owned the largest yam farm in the entire village. A weird drought affected the farmlands of all the other farmers in the village except Mazi Anayo's farm, which continued to prosper despite the fact that the other farms were barren and unable to produce crops. The villagers, on seeing how Mazi Anayo's farm prospered, began to speculate that Mazi Anayo had a hand in the evil that had befallen their various farms. One day, Mazi Anayo was in his farm with his daughter Nkoli when a group of farmers approached them in the farm saying that Mazi Anayo had been summoned to the village shrine to swear that he had no hand in what was happening to the other farmers. Mazi Anayo, on seeing how serious the accusation was, sent his daughter Nkoli to go inform her mother of what was happening. Nkoli ran as fast as she could to inform her mother Oleido that Mazi Anayo had been summoned to the village shrine to swear before the gods. Nkoli and her mother Oleido ran to the village shrine and met a large gathering of people whose eyes were fixated on the shrine. Mazi Anayo was kneeling before the shrine as the villagers forced him to swear before the gods that he had no hand in their predicament. As everyone watched in anticipation, Mazi Anayo swore before the gods and was struck with blindness in front of the entire village. Mazi Anayo began to scream that he was innocent, but the villagers, unwilling to listen to what he had to say, marched to his farm and carted away with all his yams and farm produce. They prohibited him from ever stepping his foot on his farmland again, as the villagers began to farm on his fertile land. Mazi Anayo and his family were treated like thieves, as no one associated with them or were kind enough to give them alms. As the days went by, Mazi Anayo and his family ran out of food supply, as all they had was one tuber of yam. Their storehouse was completely empty, and their farmland, occupied by the villagers who had prohibited them from ever stepping their foot on the land. Nkoli sat next to her blind father, who was now a shadow of himself. "What should we do, father? We have run out of food," she said to him as he burst out in tears. Nkoli had never seen her father in such a state before, as his tears broke her heart into tiny little pieces. As she was about leaving their hut, she heard a knock on their door. Nkoli rushed to open the door, as no one had graced their door since the incident at the shrine. She opened the door and met a very old man who pleaded for some food to eat. Nkoli, knowing that they had only one tuber of yam left, told the old man that they had no food left to give. The old man, looking so disappointed, turned to leave when Nkoli's father told her to let the man in. Mazi Anayo told Nkoli to prepare the last yam they had left and that she should give the old man his own portion of the yam. Nkoli looked at her father in shock as she tried to explain to him that this was the last food they had left. Her mother stepped in to convince Mazi Anayo to send the old man away, but Mazi Anayo was adamant as he told Nkoli to do as he had instructed. Nkoli, filled with rage, grudgingly went into the kitchen to prepare the yam. She served some of the yam to the old man, who rushed his food as though he had not eaten in years. Once the old man was done eating, he approached Mazi Anayo and thanked him for being so kind to him. Nkoli and her mother watched as the old man left their home happy and wondered where their next meal would come from. The next morning, Mazi Anayo and his family woke up to a house full of food items. Nkoli and her mother were extremely shocked as they wondered where all the food had come from. Excited but afraid, Nkoli notified her father that their home was now filled with food, and her father smiled, saying that their kindness had finally been rewarded with abundance. Nkoli and her mother were so happy because they now had more than enough to sustain them for a very long time. As the days went by, the villagers began to notice that the crops they planted on Mazi and Nayo's farmland had begun to die. They panicked because this was the only fertile land in the village and wondered what could have gone wrong. Whilst the people suffered lack of food, Mazi Nayo and his family enjoyed food in abundance as they woke up every morning to a house full of food, as their food supply replenished whenever they awoke. Mazi Nayo, on hearing how the people were suffering, had compassion towards them and decided to share his food with the entire village. His wife and daughter Nkoli were hesitant at first, remembering the cruelty they faced in the hands of the villagers. However, on seeing how serious Mazi Nayo was, Nkoli and her mother Oledu agreed to share some of their food with the villagers at the village square. They journeyed with some baskets of food on their head as they headed to the village square. When they arrived at the village square, the villagers looked at them in shock as they wondered where Oledo and her daughter got all the food from. Did we not take over their farmlands? How did they get the food? The villagers asked amongst themselves as they looked in confusion. The village elders, on seeing the amount of food that they brought, decided to get to the root of what was happening. They marched to Mazi Nayo's home and were shocked to see his house filled with food. They approached Mazi Nayo, who was still blind, to ask how he got so much food despite being blind and not having access to his farm. And Mazi Nayo told the elders that his kindness